What's up, everyone? This is the second part to the Chicago video. I'd like to get to 100 subscribers, and also today is actually my birthday, so that would be a great gift if all you guys subscribe and hit the notification bell as well, so you guys can get future content from me. Normally, I post Saturdays and Sundays because that's when I have time to actually post videos. But anyways, we're moving forward to bigger things. The Chicago the second part of the Chicago video is practically me doing an architectural tour of the city on a boat in the Chicago River. So it's actually very cool. You get to hear the guide talk about various iconic buildings in the city, and how pretty much they're run and they operated. But it started out a little bit rainy and it cleared up probably about 20 minutes into the boat ride. So it was very dope to enjoy. I like that excursion a lot. It's a very good experience. But if you have any questions pertaining to the city or pertaining to anything that I've within this experience, feel free to comment down below as well. And I want you guys to have a great day. Enjoy, and I'm gonna go enjoy my birthday. Peace, y'all.
Lucid Marsh on the shores of Lake Michigan. That is how Chicago found its very beginning, all about 240 years ago, right here. Well, with that though, let's get to some things we can actually see. If you look forward and to the right, I should say, especially for the people downstairs, for most of the tour today, I'm going to be pointing to the right. Now, I will go back and forth a bit, but for most of the tour, I'll be pointing on the right side of the boat. That's the one facing the dock right now. So, on the right side of the boat, above our dock, is this white stone building with the clock tower. That's the Wrigley Building. The Wrigley Building was finished in 1924, designed by...
Oops, sorry.
Stack of floors above that, and then an ornate decorated top. So ornate base, stack of floors, ornate top, that's French Beaux Art style. The Wrigley Building was, of course, originally the headquarters of the Wrigley Company of chewing gum fame, Juicy Fruit, Bubble Mint, Big Red, etc. The Wrigley Company is still headquartered in Chicago, but no longer in the Wrigley Building. However, the building's name is part of its historic landmark status, so no matter who owns it, it'll still be called the Wrigley Building. Okay, here on our right side, towering above us, is a very tall glass tower. That's the second tallest building in the city today. It's the Trump International Hotel and Tower. Finished in 2009, designed by a huge name in Chicago architecture, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, with lead architect Mr. Adrian Smith, who was born right here in Chicago. Now, this building is currently the second tallest in the city at 1,388 feet or 423 meters, and it has 101 stories. Now, the different roof levels on it are meant to be the same height as its neighbors. The lowest roof is the same height as the Wrigley Building behind us. The lowest roof is behind us too. And the second highest roof on the Trump Tower is the same height as this dark steel rectangular building coming up after this bridge on the right. Those roof levels of the Trump Tower, designed by Adrian Smith to provide some continuity with its older neighbors in the, as opposed to focusing on making the exteriors ornate. So he favored these rectangular buildings with minimal ornamentation on the outside. One of the first architects to allow the steel to be visible on the outside without covering it up with stone ornaments. All that came together to be called international style architecture today. International style by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Now, Mies van der Rohe was a professor, and believe it or not, these two circular towers were actually designed by a student of his. These two towers are Marina City by Bertrand Goldberg from 1968. So, Goldberg was inspired by nature. He said there are no right angles in nature. He wanted to build circular, what he viewed as more natural shapes for humans to live in. Now, in the 60s, when Marina City went up, there not many people lived in downtown Chicago, and so to entice residents, Goldberg filled the complex with a ton of amenities. Marina City originally had its own grocery store, movie theater, bowling alley, skating rink, the marina on the river, and of course, those two spiral parking ramps in the bottom of the tower, as you may have noticed. Now, if you look behind us to get one last look, at those spiral parking ramps there, you might get a little nervous imagining cars falling off Marina City and into the river. Don't worry though, that's only happened twice. Now, that is true, of course, but the whole truth is that it's never happened on accident. Both of those times were stunts. Once for Steve McQueen's last movie, The Hunter, and the other for an auto insurance commercial. Okay. After this bridge on the right, there's a brick building with a clock tower. This is the Reed Murdoch Center, finished in 1914, designed by George Nimmons. It is a window to the river's past, because 100 years ago, the Chicago River was our commercial port. Steamships would come in from Lake Michigan, dock at warehouses like this to load and unload goods. Now we do still have a commercial port in Chicago, but it's on the south side today. However, this brick building from 1914 remains a remnant of that industrial past of the river in downtown Chicago. Now the style of architecture of this brick building, the Reed Murdoch Center, is actually called Chicago School style. That's defined by being a brick or stone building from the early 1900s with so many windows, because that required steel framing, which was state-of-the-art technology back then, being perfected right here in Chicago. Now, here on our right side, this glass tower is an example of some newer technology. 300 North LaSalle Street by Picard and Chilton from 2009 is one of the most environmentally friendly buildings in the city. It uses river water to supplement its air conditioning. It brings water in from the river, circulates it as coolant in the AC, and releases the water back to the river cleaner than it found it. That's a key factor in making 300 North LaSalle Platinum certified by Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, LEED Platinum, a very prestigious and difficult to achieve environmental architecture award. Now this next thing I want to talk about is a little tricky to point out, so bear with me, pay attention. If you look right in front of us, and then a little bit to the right, and a little bit up, you might spot a stone building along the river here. That's a joke, you see, because here on the right, extra large and in charge, this is the Merchandise Mart on our right side. In fact, when the Merchandise Mart was finished in 1932, it was the largest building in the world with 4.2 million square feet or 400,000 square meters of floor space. Now, the Merch Mart is Art Deco style. Art Deco defined with three main things: vertical lines, being narrower at the top than the base, and having geometric ornamentation throughout the building. And it was Mr. Marshall Field of Marshall Field's department stores who bankrolled it to consolidate his many warehouses around the city into one giant warehouse downtown on the river today. It's a mixed-use office building today, and up until 2008, the U.S. Post abundance of little wild onions. In the summer heat, those onions would ripen and stink, and that's how the Potawatomi named this location. So, New York, Big Apple; Chicago, smelly onion. Now you know. Okay. Now, as we head up the north branch of the river, I'll point to the left a bit. In front of us to the left is this concrete tower with the curve and the blue lights. That's the Residences at River Bend. Now, this is from by James DeStefano, built in 2002. James DeStefano is an architect who really likes something called contextualism. Contextualism is matching your surroundings. The building is curved to match the bend in the river just south of it. 2002 by James DeStefano. Now, in front of us to the left is a boxy brick building. That brick building is the oldest one we'll talk about tonight. It's called Fulton House, built in 1898. Designed by Frank Abbott. Now, it was originally built to be a warehouse, a cold storage warehouse, with 3-foot thick walls insulated with horsehair and cork to keep perishable goods cool. Now, the building was converted into condos in the 1980s by architect Harry Weiss. Harry Weiss likes boats and sailing. He put the starfish on the walls and the porthole windows on the top when he remodeled this old warehouse into condominiums. Okay. Now, in front of us to the left, there is a row of 4 townhomes with sloping roofs. In front of us to the left, the short row of 4 townhomes. These are the Chicago River Cottages from 1988. And look, they've got porthole windows, metallic spiral staircases like you'd find on boats, and lots of triangular shapes which are meant to make you think of sails on sailboats. Well, the Chicago River Cottages is also by Harry Weiss from 1988, so lots of nautical theming, just like the starfish of Fulton House. And there's actually one more nautical thing I'll point out about the Chicago River Cottages after we get past the Kinsey Street Bridge. So if you look to the left and behind us, above the bridge, back to the sloping roofs of the Chicago River Cottages, those 2 sloping roofs resemble the sails of sailboats racing each other. Okay. Now, bouncing back to the right side of the boat, here on our right side we have the East Bank Club, a long building with long rows of windows. The East Bank Club was built in 1979, and it is a high-end fitness facility, which is to say expensive gym. When it was built in 1979, it did not have these windows. That's because in the 70s, people were not generally very interested in looking at the Chicago River. The river was dirtier and smellier and had odd things floating around in it. But after the Clean Water Act, and especially in the 1980s, we worked hard to clean up the river. These windows were added to let people enjoy the improved view. Now, being a high-end exclusive gym in Chicago, Barack and Michelle Obama, Michael Jordan, Rahm Emanuel, Oprah have all had memberships at the East Bank Club at various times. Okay. Now here on our left side, bouncing back to the left side of the boat, we cleaned up the river so nicely people even wanted to live along it. Here on our left side is Kinsey Park, a complex of 70 brick row homes in a gated community. It opened in 2002 and was designed by Haynes and Papa George architects. Now, all 70 of the homes in Kinsey Park originally sold for $1.2 million before a single one of them was even built, sight completely unseen. That's how high demand was to live here after we cleaned up the river. Someone who knows more than me told me they probably sell for about $2.5 million these days. Okay, I'm gonna get a drink of water, just a sec.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, now bouncing back to the right side of the boat, we're going to stick to the right for a while. Here on our right side, hello there. Lovely evening for a boat ride. Here on our right, we have this brick building with the black balconies on the walls. These are the Chicago River Lofts. The original brick building was finished in 1909, not to be residences, but to be the headquarters of Wallace Printing, a company that still exists, but it's been absorbed by other companies since then. Now, when you see metal balconies attached to a wall like that, you can assume the building underwent adaptive reuse, which is the architectural phrase for changing a building from one purpose to another. Okay, after this bridge, we're going to be looking forward and to the right. Just a sec. Ahead of us and to the right, there is a glass tower with white steel beams pointing up the wall in a chevron pattern. That's Erie on the Park. Erie on the Park is from 2002 by Lucien Lagrange, and just a couple seconds later, just to the right of Erie on the Park, you can see Kingsbury on the Park, another building with white steel beams and balconies that resemble scaffolding. Erie on the Park and Kingsbury on the Park are both by Lucien Lagrange from 2002, and they are both European industrial style. European industrial style is defined as appearing unfinished, even though they're complete. I especially like how Kingsbury has those scaffolding balconies, making it look like it's under construction. Now, ahead of us to the right, there's that blue glass tower with concrete corners going up the whole height of the building. That's the Montgomery. The Montgomery was built in 1971, designed by Minoru Yamasaki, to be the headquarters of Montgomery Ward catalogs. Montgomery Wards was a retail giant founded here in Chicago in the 1800s. At various points in the 20th century, Montgomery Wards was the largest retailer in the United States by annual sales. During their heyday, they never owned a single brick and mortar store, only a catalog company when they were the largest retailer in the United States and at times even the world. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Montgomery Wards in a second, but first, look to the right, beyond that little black building on our right side. Keep looking way in the distance to the right in the sky. In a few seconds, you will see a black tower with white antennas on top. Way in the distance to the right, just coming into view right about now. This is the John Hancock Center, that black tower way in the background to the right. The John Hancock Center was built in 1969, designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. It was the tallest building in the city at the time. It's the 5th tallest building in Chicago today. Okay, now, a little bit more about Montgomery Wards. Montgomery Wards was founded by Mr. Aaron, Montgomery Ward. We actually owe something interesting to him, our public lakefront in Chicago. We have 28 miles of lakefront on Lake Michigan in Chicago, and it's all public land, parks, beaches, etc. First and foremost, that's thanks to our city's founding charter, which guaranteed our entire lakefront be public forever. But in the early 1900s, a lot of rich Chicagoans started finding loopholes to buy lakefront property. Montgomery Ward took the spirit of that public lake seriously, though, sued those people out of their developments, and the Club of Rich Chicagoans, not that big, he was suing his own friends, but he stuck with it, and thanks to him, we still have an almost completely uninterrupted public lakefront today. Okay. Now here on our right side is this light-colored building with more adaptive reuse style balconies. This is the old headquarters to Montgomery Wards. It was built in 1912, designed by Schmidt, Garden, and Martin. Now, let's see. Oh, and after this next bridge, I'm actually going to have you look behind us and up onto the roof of the old headquarters here to look at a green sculpture that's up on the roof of it. So wait till after the bridge, and then look behind us and up to the right on the roof of that old headquarters. Okay. So there's a green statue up and behind us on the right, on the roof of that. That's the Spirit of Progress. The Spirit of Progress lighting the way. It's by Augustus St. Gaudens from 1893, although that's actually a slightly smaller replica of the original sculpture that's been on that roof since the 1920s. Now we have one more Montgomery Wards building to talk about. Here on the right, it's a bit hard to miss. This is The Domain, is its official name today. This is a giant old building. It was the original main warehouse for Montgomery Wards, called the Catalog House at the time. Built in 1912, designed by Schmidt, Garden, Martin, just like the old headquarters. Now, when Montgomery Wards went out of business, most of this old warehouse sat abandoned from 2002 until 2004. When Groupon moved in, became the main tenant of the building and rented it out so that other businesses could rent space in it. In the process of remodeling this huge old warehouse, they found about 300 pairs of old roller skates. Now, those skates were not gifts that never got shipped out from the catalog. You see, Montgomery Wards was always innovating in efficiency and encouraged their employees to skate from end to end of the quarter-mile length of this warehouse to pick and fulfill those shipping orders as fast as possible. Okay. All right. Well, I want to point out by saying directly to our right, there's this glass tower with a parabolic arch at the base. This is River Point by Picard and Chilton from 2017. The arch is actually a load-bearing support. It's not only decorative, and the shape and angle of the arch is designed so that it avoids passing through railroads underneath it and the subway tunnel underneath that. That's form following function. Pretty to look at, but actually for a reason. Now, some of you are looking ahead of us already, and I know why. After this bridge on the right is this glass tower with diagonal undersides and a perhaps alarmingly narrow base. This is 150 North Riverside Plaza from 2017 by Getch and Partners Architects. It has a narrow base to avoid the river and railroads on the other side. Here's how it stays upright. These diagonal steel beams on the underside of it continue through the building, ending up deep underground, and they are matched by beams from the other side, which creates X bracing at the base. Inside the top of the tower, there are 150,000 gallons of water in a specialized tank called a mass damper. When the wind blows against the building, the water is pushed against the blow of the wind to balance it out. Now, it would stay upright without the mass damper, but that system prevents it from swaying nauseatingly on windy days. Okay. After this next bridge, I'm actually going to have you look to the left. Don't worry, I'll talk about the building with the Boeing logo on it later, but for now, let's look to the left. On our left side, we have this glass tower, which is actually brand new. This is the Bank of America Tower from 2021. The diagonal supports along the river are actually meant to remind you of the diagonal undersides of 150 North Riverside behind us. They're both by Getch and Partners Architects, meant to be unified in style with these diagonal elements on the river. Oh, what was I gonna? Sorry. I don't know, I just lost my train of thought, but I think I said everything. Yeah, both by Getchen Partners, unified in style with these diagonal elements on the river. Now, after the next bridge on our left side, ahead of us to the left, we have this limestone behemoth. This is the Civic Opera Building, one of my favorites ahead of us on the left here. The Civic Opera Building is from 1928, designed by Graham Anderson Probst and White, home of the second largest opera auditorium in the United States, 3,500 seats behind this big blank wall. Now, the building as a whole is Art Deco style, vertical lines, narrower at the top, geometric ornamentation throughout the building, and the whole building resembles a giant throne. It's got two armrests and a backrest. The seat faces to the west, to our right. Now, people have theorized that Samuel Insull, who bankrolled the Opera House, and lived in the penthouse at the top for 1 year until he went bankrupt, wanted the Opera House to be a throne overlooking his railway empire at the time in the western United States. Maybe. The truth is, though, Graham Anderson Probst and White probably designed those armrests and backrests independently of Mr. Insull, simply to allow cross ventilation through those narrow sections of buildings through the windows. Cross ventilation was very important before air conditioning was common. Without it, a stone building like that might have to shut down in the summer. It could be so unbearably hot. Okay, we're going to bounce back to the right side of the boat. Here on our right side at eye level, you can see a train here parked underneath the buildings there. This empty space to our right with the train is the train shed for Union Station. This is where the platforms are, where passengers load and unload trains at Chicago Union Station. Now, the buildings built above the train shed are all designed to be vibration-proof and soundproof because of those heavy, noisy trains potentially shaking the ground underneath them. And the buildings are designed to take in the diesel fumes from the locomotives and release them cleaner into the air above. That is... the black building we just passed behind us on the right, that's Gateway 1, and its identical sister building directly to our right is Gateway 2. They're both international style by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill from the 1960s. Now, in front of us on the right, there is that white rectangular building. That's Gateway 3 by Skidmore, Owings, Merrill. Now, Gateway 3 was originally dark gray, but after it went up, the architects thought it would look better in a lighter color. They removed the gray panels, except for on the first two floors, and replaced them with the white panels you see today. Those removable, replaceable panels are called precast panels. And again, you'll see the original gray ones on the first two floors after the bridge. And then, right next door to Gateway 3, ahead of us on the right, is that short building with the lit up sign facing the river there with those X's on the walls. This was built as the Midwest Commodity Exchange's trading floor in the 70s. Those tubular X braces on the wall, designed by Dr. Fosler Rahman Khan of Skidmore, Owings, Merrill, to support the roof from the wall and avoid causing visual obstruction across the trading floor with pillars. Now, it was an important piece of architectural engineering at the time, and today you can see the building is convenience itself, being both a gym and a bakery. Okay. Now, after this next bridge on the right, there is a glass building with a curved shape. James DeStefano, who likes contextualism, designed this one too. This is, on our right side, Gateway 4 by James DeStefano and Skidmore, Owings, Merrill. It's green glass to match the river's color, and it curves to match the bend in the river. But I'd better have you look to the left. To the left and up here is the world's largest You Are Here map. This building is 300 South Wacker Drive, indicating its own location with that red peg on the map there. Now, if you keep looking at it, it might, they shine a spotlight on it at night, so it might turn on any second. It also might not, so don't be too disappointed. But anyway, that's 300 South Wacker Drive, 1973 by Epstein and Sons. Now, it originally didn't have the map on it. It was just a typical international style building, but years later, a new owner put the building on the map by putting a map on the building and the building on that map. It was installed and designed in 2013, designed by ESI Design. Now, here on our right side, we have this limestone behemoth. This is the old post office in Chicago. The old post office was finished in 1932, designed by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. Looking at the traffic times there on our right side, it's 19 minutes to Harlem Avenue right now. Not too bad, it's 9 minutes when the traffic's clear. But on my last tour when it went by, it was 43 minutes to Harlem Avenue. Anyway, now the old post office was the largest post office in the world. The old post office was the largest post office in the world when finished in 1932. I'll tell you more about it after the break. Okay. So, looking to the right at the old post office, a bit behind us now on the right, that whole limestone building was originally the central post office here in the city. Designed by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, Art Deco style. It was the largest post office in the world, but Chicago has never been the largest city in the United States, let alone the world. Yet there's one specific reason we had the biggest post office. What would that have been? Tangentially related to that, yes, but more specifically, catalogs. We were the mail order retail capital of the world. Montgomery Wards, Sears and Roebuck, Spiegel catalog, Marshall Fields, all founded here in Chicago. In addition, lots of other historic catalogs like JCPenney were not founded here, but operated huge distribution centers to take advantage of our central location for shipping around the country. Now, up until the late 20th century, all of those catalog orders were passing through the largest post office in the world that we just passed. Now, for the young folks on the boat, a catalog is, if you imagine Amazon.com printed as a book. It would somehow find its way to your mailbox. You'd flip through the pages, call the company, and tell them what you wanted. Now, those products would arrive not with 24-hour overnight shipping, but somewhere from 2 to 6 weeks. And despite the fact of being physical printed books, these catalogs still offered a wide variety of goods. Some of them, in their heyday, were huge, bigger than phone books. And for the young folks on the boat, a phone book is, I'm going to move on from that. But anyway, the Postal Service moved out of the old post office in 1997. It's a mixed-use office building today. Here on our right side is the new main post office behind the trees there, built in 1997. Not much to look at from the river, but it is the most automated post office in the United States. Okay. We're going to look to the left. The really interesting inside of this apartment and condo building, how the hallway in the middle is actually a winding atrium, and the hallways are balconies along the people's doors to their apartments. Now, this curvy concrete building on our left side is River City. It was built in 1986, designed by Bertrand Goldberg. River City by Bertrand Goldberg. Hey, that sounds familiar. Goldberg is the same guy who did Marina City downtown, those two circular concrete towers. So, another curvy concrete building. It had its own grocery store, just like Marina City when it was built in the 80s. It has its own marina on the river as well. So Goldberg really had a particular style, and not only that, he had a particular style in what his buildings consisted of. He liked to design cities within cities, big residential complexes with lots of room for amenities so that people didn't have to leave much if they didn't want to. Okay, now we're going to look to the right. If you look directly to our right and way in the distance, there's a shopping center, and beyond the shopping center, there is a radio tower with a red light blinking on top. So, directly to our right, way in the distance, radio tower with a red blinking light on top. I am going to talk about that radio tower for a surprising amount of time. And that's because it stands on the location where Mrs. O'Leary's barn once stood. So right there is where the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 began. Okay. And I'll tell you about it in a minute. First though, one more pin in the fire talk, because you might be curious about this brick building with the smokestacks ahead of us on the right. The brick building with the smokestacks ahead of us is the old coal power plant for Union Station. Union Station provided their own electricity by burning coal here all the way till 2011. Now it's been abandoned since then and will probably end up being demolished because there's no access for anyone to get to it, to convert it into a business or something. There's a river on this side and a huge rail yard on the other. The building is industrial Art Deco style, designed by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. Not demolished yet, but still looking like it probably will be eventually. Okay, now let's talk about the fire. After we get past the coal power plant here, you will be able to see a Whole Foods, and then to the right of the Whole Foods is the radio tower, and to the right of the radio tower is the DSW. So, in between the Whole Foods and the DSW on our right side, there's that radio tower. Let's talk about the fire. The Great Chicago Fire began at 9:30 p.m., October 8th, 1871, right where that radio tower stands today. The fire spread east all the way to Lake Michigan. The fire spread north about 2 miles farther north than where we turned the boat around by the Montgomery Wards complex. It was huge. It destroyed a third of the city at the time. The fire spread, I'll wait for the bridge just a second. Oh, well, and there we go. Okay. The fire spread up to Fullerton Avenue, which was at the time the northern edge of the city. The wind never changed direction. It blew the fire to the north edge of town, where it ran out of city to burn and burned itself out. It was not actively extinguished, it just ran out of stuff to burn when it reached the edge of town. Now, also, the fire crossed the river. Chicagoans, including the fire department, which, by the way, the fire department was not some ragtag team of know-nothings. We actually had a very state-of-the-art fire department for the 1870s, but I'll explain how the fire was able to get so out of control later on. Now, the fire, by the time it reached the river, was so big and so hot, it was producing its own wind, blowing chunks of burning wood over the water to continue the flames on the other side. The fire burned over 36 hours over the course of October 8th, 9th, and 10th, 1871. At the end of those 36 hours, 300 people were killed and 100,000 were left homeless.